Emily Zell.
Danny Lieberger.
We're here at the Deconstruction Zone. We're back at it again. What are we talking about today?
This is Emily check-in time.
We're already there.
I want to talk about how this Sunday I went to church.
Yeah, you did.
To a Unitarian Universalist church.
Yeah. Where about? Give them a shout out. Maybe someone's looking.
Shout out to First Universalist Church.
In St. Louis?
Yeah.
Okay.
Really interesting experience. So I brought a date there.
Yeah.
That's the funniest part of it. But
it's a weird date.
It was like our 5th or 6th date, so
Okay.
it was fine. But anyway, that's not important. But so yeah, I wanted to go because they were doing their whole service was on like poetry because it's National Poetry Month, and I'm an English teacher. And so we went, and it was a really interesting experience, and I kind of wanted to unpack it with you. And I also want to unpack what the guy I went with said. I went with a bunch of friends.
Yeah, I want to hear all of it.
Okay. So.
What is it like? So, because I've never been into a Unitarian Universal. I've been into a Baha'i church, which is like kind of takes lots of different things, but I think Universalist Unitarian's like kind of its own world. So like set the stage a little before you get into anything. Like you walk in, like what are you seeing? What are you smelling? What's happening?
Okay. It's a little bit cold, but it's like a really and I'm wearing a really cute
old
outfit.
building, new building.
So the outside of the building looks modern, but the inside sanctuary is like just this beautiful like sanctuary that kind of looks like it would be at Hogwarts.
Okay.
Love it. Like yeah, it was so stunning. There's like stained glass and it was like dark wood.
Okay.
Anyway, so I walk in, people are like greeting you, and then they were like, "Do you want to like sign up for our email list?" And I was like, "No." And and like, "Do you want to make a name tag?" And I was like, "No." And then I just walked up. I was kind of being a bitch, but I was just like ready to get there, you know?
Yeah.
I was like there to be an observer.
Yeah, you're like ready to get your church on.
My poetry on.
Right.
And so it was me, my date, and then our 2 friends, Aaron and Austin, and their roommate, Joe.
Friends of the pod. I feel like they make it on as much as anybody else.
Because that's they're a big part of my spiritual journey. Yeah. But so we're all going, and we sit down, and everyone's like super nice and smiling, and they're like, "Welcome, we're so excited you're here." And we sit down. We were like 2 minutes late, so it had already started. And it was some sort of like call to worship, but it was a poem. And so basically the whole service, they never ever talked about Jesus like one time.
But they're not like a Jesus-centric religion, right?
No, right. But it is a church. I don't know. I'll just keep going. We're going to keep going. But it was really interesting. So they like read a poem, and then we did sing some hymns, which honestly I loved. And they were hymns that I like remember. One of them I did remember from church, but it was very like low stakes. Like it maybe talked about God, but it was more just like, I don't know, more basically this is what it comes down to. And then we talked about poetry, and the theme was called like poetry as a frame for conscious experience. And so we read like Keats, and we read a sonnet by Shakespeare that was about time. And it was this whole, and we sang a song that was a musicified version of Amanda Gorman's poem, The Hill We Climb. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I think you've talked about it before.
She was the inaugural poet for Biden's inauguration.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was like really beautiful. Like we were all singing like there's only light if we're brave enough to see it, if we're brave enough to be it, which is like the final line. Super cool. And so that was interesting. And then the sermon was like low-key pretty long and like kind of, I don't know. It was good. It was interesting. There was good points in it. And then we sang another hymn, and that was the hymn I like had recognized. So it was kind of like sweet and fun. And then and their prayer request portion wasn't prayer. It was just sharing our joys and sorrows. And there was something really interesting about that and really cool, because I felt like in no part of that was anything trying to be fixed. But then at the end, the like lady who was doing the liturgy was just like, these are our joys or like, these are all of our joys. May they be magnified because they are shared. And it was just this like honoring of things being shared, which I thought was like really powerful. And then the kids came and like they read a book to him, and then and then that was the end. And then they were like, and then some people in front of us were like, "Do you want to come to our young adults event?" And we were like, "No." But anyway, so then we leave and I go to lunch with my date, and he was like, "What was that?" He was like, "I have never been to a church that like wasn't prescriptive and wasn't didn't really mention like God or Jesus a lot." And it was really confusing, and I feel like I didn't get out of it what I expect to get out of church. And I was like, I think that's so interesting. I was like, for me, I found it somewhat refreshing because I didn't feel like I was being told to do anything. I felt like I got to enter into a space and ponder existence. And I think that's what church should be, is like to just sit and think about like, man, like it's whack to be alive. And and so all that to say, it was really interesting, our different experiences, like what we took out of it. And it created a lot of conversation, which I think is what art does. And I think that that is what the poetry service was kind of celebrating. But it was interesting that I felt kind of refreshed and he felt like there was a lot of lacking, which I think both are very valid. But that was kind of that was my like spiritual experience of the week.
That's interesting. So would you go back?
I would go back. I wasn't like, I'm a you for life. Like, but I would go again.
So
it was interesting.
So what would compel you to go back? If it wasn't Poetry Month?
See, that's a good question. Because it was really, the poetry was pretty dope.
Yeah.
I think if I wanted to like if I wanted to go to a place where I just wanted to like think really existentially and not be like guided in any way, I think that would be the place. Because it was a place where I was like, I feel like we're coming together, we're experiencing poetry, and we are thinking about life and thinking about what it is to like love people and love our world. I think that's what was cool, is I think it provided a place that sparked conversation and sparked thought. And sometimes I think that's awesome. But I will say, like, because there's not really a lot that you're like, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there and I was like, I just want to be a part of this community. Like,
yeah,
it was just like, oh, like that made me think, and that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that very interesting, the experience, and like your guys different as you walked out.
Yeah.
I imagine I would probably be on the side of your date a little bit. Like,
yeah.
Because it sounds like it was an over an hour long service just from hearing the compartments.
It was about an hour and a half.
Yeah. And so I'd walk out and be like, that could have been enlightening, but also be like, was it worth my time? Like, which I think is an interesting,
I get what
like,
you're
what
saying.
makes it worth your time. So I wonder, like, it just sparked a question to me, like when if you could construct your ultimate like church experience, religious experience, like faith, all of that, like from a purely, and there's some problematic things about what I'm about to ask you as far as the question goes, but as far as a purely transactional thing, like you're going and you're getting something, you're receiving something, like into the space, like you talked about, like just like unpacking, you walked in, the space was visually compelling, and what I heard you say was like familiar without being like triggering. Like it felt
100%.
beautiful. Like you sang songs that were like the Coke Zero of hymns. Like you got the feeling you loved without the theology. It's the best Coke of all time. You got all you got the song format and style without the theology, that like you didn't sing nothing but the blood.
And it was very liturgical, which I loved.
So like there was that familiar aspect. You're also very cerebral. Like you want to ponder the existential realities of our life, and you're very artistic. So it had all of these things.
Yeah, it did.
You really loved. So when you think about then, like those things I heard you say about what you liked about it, but when you're constructing whatever the thing is that you want to engage in, whenever that might be, like if it was tomorrow, like what are you wanting to get out of that?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and I was actually going to ask you something kind of similar in a sense that it made so when I was talking to my date afterward, I said he goes, I feel like they didn't do their job as a church. And I thought that was fascinating. And he was like, because their job is to like remind me truth and tell me what to do. And I was like, to me, their job is to create a space to ponder existence. And I was like, so in that sense, they were very successful. And so but then I like, it made me think about like, what is my definition of what church is or what I want it to be?
Yeah.
So I'm not really answering your question.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in what your answer to that would be.
Yeah, I think
Because I will say, he was like, afterward, he was like, when are we going to the well? Which was like awesome, you know, which was like super cool.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting to like talk. Like,
Yeah.
I think realistically, if I was going to go back to a church space, which I think I'm getting close to that point, it would be the well, just because like I love the people. And I do think that y'all hold that balance really well. If it is a place to ponder and it is a place that feels kind of low stakes, like it's not a triggering space.
Yeah.
But it is a little, I'm not even sure I would say prescriptive, because I feel like personally your sermons are very much like, I'm going to put this here to ponder and challenge you,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
But it is obviously more Jesus-y.
Yeah. So if I was going to, and I think you're on par with the vibe that I think we're going out there. And you said it really early on. This was back when we were still recording in the storefront. We were in like the kind of reclining chairs.
Yeah.
We talked about church being like the place where big questions are wrestled with, right? You said a little different than that. But like for me, I think I side a little bit with your date, and like it's a place where the truth is proclaimed and challenges are happen, like you're met with. I think I believe wholeheartedly in Jesus being the truth. I'm a little more gray on other truths,
Right?
but like I'm gonna proclaim the gospel, right? Like
For
that's
sure.
what I think I'm called to challenge people, but also to like wrestle with big questions. And I think that's one of the things that we always revert back to at the well. Whether it's because like I have my own set of questions, or it's like I can tell it's what the community needs, but I try to always like pull back to that as our true north of like, are we actually wrestling with things? And I float that line of like, as a pastor and the leader of the church, it's like there's a level of prescriptiveness that I have to possess and portray.
For sure.
Because we're a Christian and specifically United Methodist congregation,
Yeah.
right? But one of the things that like talking to some of our friends like Aaron Austin that come, and you and other people that come, like one of the things that people have found compelling is like Jesus is presented as a compelling like option, and if you're not fully there yet, like no one is shaming you on that.
100%.
But there's also no juking off of like Jesus. And so I think like that's something that I've found to be, I don't know if that's unique to the well. Like I know other churches that I think do that well, do a good job of that. But I think it's one of the things that I think I want to be at the core of who we are. Like whether we're 10,000 people or 100 people, like that we're pondering questions, that the furthest away from certainty feels welcome, and the person that feels like they have it all together is not only feels welcome, but is welcoming that person that feels uncertain. You know, like that's one of the things that I've really appreciated is the way that the community, like, so we just did a testimony video with a girl named Madison, and she talked about her faith, and one of the things she said was like the community is the important part to her, like, and her fiance Samara, like I think they iron sharpen iron, they like dive into faith, they have those conversations, but for her, like for church to be like compelling again, it's like they needed a safe space to like be themselves. And so that's a lot of things to say, but like I think creating a safe space, creating a space where people are challenged. I think if we're not challenged in any, like a lot of spaces, I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, so I find them generally worthless if I'm not being challenged in some way. And so that's just part of my personality. But like I think challenge is a part of it. Like Jesus is a big part of it, and like, but I think like creating space for everyone to have a seat at the table is important.
Absolutely. And I think I think what's cool about the well is like everyone is invited, and I totally agree. I don't think, because I remember the first time I ever walked into the well, I was like, I don't know if I'm a Christian, I'm freaking out. And I remember just sitting there and just being like flooded with hope that like I still could belong in a church space with like all my questions. This was like January when I last January.
Yeah, and I think we were like, I remember I was preaching on something in the Galatians world, right? And we were talking about
Yeah,
that.
and you said Galatians is a letter where people are trying to figure out how to follow Jesus, and I was like, oh,
yeah,
like I can totally vibe with that. And so I agree. Like I think that space is really beautiful in that way. I would say the difference was one. Oh, but I was also gonna say you create space for everyone at the table and a voice for everyone at the table because you usually have us like talk.
yeah,
Which I think is really cool and important to like really hear other people's views. I remember we were talking about the afterlife, and I remember I was sitting at a table, and this one woman.
This is at the well.
Yes, at the well, and she was like, "Absolutely, I do not believe in an afterlife." And I was just like, "Whoa!" And I just didn't see that coming. But she was just like, "Yeah, it's just like not the thing for me." And I was just like, "Oh!" But it was a great conversation, and there was no shame or like, "Oh, you have to get on our like." The afterlife level.
Yeah.
Which I think is just I think what the well does really well, and I think is that is that you know what's core and then you leave the gray areas gray.
Yeah.
And I think that is huge. And I think what I enjoyed about like the UU church was that everything was gray, and in a sense that felt like the pressure was off.
Yeah, like you said this a few times, and it was very low stakes.
Very low stakes.
Yeah.
And I think the well is too, but it's a little more like we're focused on Jesus.
Yeah. I will also say that like what's interesting about the well is like going back to the conversations around tables and stuff is like to your thing, like I was talking about the afterlife. This lady's like, I don't believe in it, I don't need it. And you're like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. One of the things I found that to happen a lot with people, and what I found to be cool is the moments after where they're like, well, we were sitting together, we were singing together, we have a relationship, I've learned something new about you. And I think in some other context, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to kick you out because you don't have like the orthodox belief or the same belief as me. But it creates a deeper level of like conversation and pondering and wrestling. And I think multiple directional challenging, which is what I like. It's like, I don't think I'm the sole challenger of our congregation. Like yes. I watch other people spur other people into greater levels of thought and kind of exploration, which I think what I find about it is equally, I love it, and it's messier, right? Because then there's like lots of different like rabbit trails that things can go, and like someone's like, well, Pastor Danny's like pretty much told me I could be a Pastafarian and I could believe in a flying spaghetti monster because like and so like I can see things going that direction, right? But I think creating, like you said, like here are essentials, which I don't know that we would even use it because that seems strong, but I mean, but here, like Jesus is essential, right?
Here's our focus. Maybe is that a better word? Yeah,
our focus, and then everything else around it is tangential, to say the least. So.
What are we doing here?
I'm so sorry.
We're making a professional podcast.
I'm so sorry. I think this is a great transition into
email corner.
Thank you. We're working on it. So this one comes from
hey, BT Dubs, good talk. I feel like we didn't like super wrap it up. I liked where we got with that.
Yeah, do you want to wrap it up before I transition?
Just don't hit the mics.
No, I just like some closure.
Yeah, I'm with you. So this one comes from Christy.
Hey, Christy.
DM to me. She attends the Well online, and shot me kind of an interesting question, like theologically, that I thought I would be just interested to like hear your thoughts. And so she kind of goes on and talks about how the well has been important to her and those sorts of things. But I'll get into the meat and potatoes of it, which is I've been working through the concept of original sin and just trying to find out where I stand. I know I still believe in sin, and sin is very real and present in our lives, but original sin is something I struggle with understanding. Any thoughts? So what are your thoughts? I shot her a response back, and I can share mine.
Yeah.
Too, but when you think about original sin, we talked about original friendship.
With original friendship. That's what I immediately thought of.
Yeah. Well, touch back on that just in case someone mentioned that episode.
Well, I think we can talk about more stuff with that. I think original sin, my Sunday school teacher said, when you come out of the womb, you are born rebellious against God.
Yeah.
And that is like, whoa, dude, like you're a little baby. You're just like, what is this world? But then I heard that in my second grade Sunday school, and I was like, Wow. Okay.
You're like, I've been shitty for 2 whole years.
Right.
Or-
And because I think we would say, like, but babies haven't sinned. And she was like, but you have a sinful heart right away.
yeah.
Like, she would always ask us, like, do you sin because you're sinners, or are you sinners because you sin?
Yeah.
And the answer is you sin because you're a sinner. And that is your identity. And then sin comes out of that. And to me, that is the sketchy part about original sin. And I think what changes original sin, I'm taking what Christy's saying as, like, we're born sinful.
Yes, I think that was the direction.
Okay. And so I actually think that's kind of different than original friendship, because we kind of talked about the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Anyway, so original sin, you're born sinful. I think it changes. We've said this too, but, like, I do think it changes the game. Instead of saying I'm sinful, to say I have sin, or, like, sin is a part of me, because it goes back to, like, I would never, someone would be like, what's the truest thing about you? And you had cancer. You wouldn't be like, I'm cancerful.
Yeah.
You would just be like, you would say a bunch of other things. Then you'd be like, I do have cancer.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that I'm struggling with, and it's something that I'm, like, working to heal, but it is a part of my life. It can be debilitating at times, and to me, that really changes the game between I am a little 1 second old baby who wants to run from God and slap him in the face, and then to later be told by pastors that that is exactly what I'm doing, is slapping God in the face.
Yeah.
Versus I am fearfully and wonderfully made in God's image and made for God, and like made by God and for God. And there are parts that aren't perfect and broken, but, like, that isn't the truest thing about me. It is an absolute game changer. And I'm glad Christy's asking this question. I was saying this today, actually. Someone was saying, like, I just don't think theology is that big of a deal. Like, we just don't know. And I was like, okay. I was like, for sure we don't, like, are we sure? Whatever. I was like, but our theology does affect how we live our day-to-day life. And so in that sense, it's very important. Because I think if you believe in original sin, or if you don't, changes it completely how you view yourself.
Yeah, I would agree with. I said early on in this podcast, and it used to be a refrain that I would say to other, like, I think theology's lame or not important. And I think on this podcast I said really early on, like, I think it could be a tool of the devil to, like, distract us, which I do think I can, like, agree with a little bit.
Yeah.
But to your point, it's like, whether your theology is really, really affirming, progressive, exclusive, conservative, reformed, whatever, it's like it will impact not only how you live your life and how you treat others, but how you treat yourself. And so regardless of, like, what you think about it, or if you think it's unimportant, I think everyone does have a theology. Like, everyone has a theological framework, even if they don't express it or can write a long paper on it. And so I do think, to your point, like, theology and what we think about God and us, it's all really important. And when it comes down to, for me, like, original sin, I think with you, like, I said this to Chrissy, like, sin is a part of our world. Like, I think that brokenness is a part of our world. I think we can be, like, predisposed is not the right word, but we can, like, lean towards sinning as, like, a predisposition. But to your point, like, I would say it's not our identity.
Right.
And, like, I look at myself, like, I can see myself in certain places where I've, like, built up habits of, like, it's easier to do what I know isn't right. And, like, I know that it's not right, but I can do it, right? But that also does spark, like, another conversation about morality and, like, who gets to decide what's right and wrong, right? In terms of, like, different cultures and whatnot. But I do think sin is a part of our existence. But I'm with you, like, the idea of a God that's, like, loving and would look at God's creation at one point and be like, this isn't just good, it's very good. Like, I love you. Like, I want to be in a relationship with you. Like, all the acts of Jesus after the fall, like, all of those sorts of things, like, seem incongruent with a God like, I'm just going to create these ultimately awful people. I don't know.
Absolutely. Like that. Yeah. And that, here's the thing, is that's so Calvinist, because that also doesn't feel like free will. If that's so much your disposition that you're born a sinner, then, like, how much actual personal blame do you have? Because it's just who you are.
Yeah.
And it goes again to, like, you have no choice in the matter.
Yeah.
So it's like you sin, but it's like, I'm totally depraved. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
You know?
It sucks to suck.
Sucks to suck.
So, but I would just say, I do think a lot of people struggle with the idea of sin in general, original sin, all of that. Like, and I mean, even when we went to Mount Union now several weeks ago, like we had someone ask us about like, is the creation story literal? I think is
Yeah.
what they said. But really an undertone of that is like, is this how sin entered the world? Like,
Whoa. Okay.
is God, like, did God just create man and what? Like, there's so many theological undertones to why that question's being asked. Or like, why did the flood happen? Like, is that literal? Did Jonah really get eaten by a whale? I mean, there's so many different questions.
And shot out the
That
blowhole.
shot out the blowhole. That's a callback, my friends.
So you better listen in order, or you won't understand.
So, but I think Christy's question is pretty universal in the sense that like we all wrestle with that. I know, like, I still wrestle with like my understanding of sin.
For sure.
I remember in seminary, my professor, I think for ethics, I think is what it was. But his like dissertation was on like sin and evilness, and like this guy, like all he wanted to do was tell people like how like he just had all very defined thoughts, and it was like an exhausting class for me because I was like always trying to like wrestle with sin and where it was in the world and why do bad things happen to good people, and like, is it God's fault? Is it our fault? Is it arbitrary? And I think I left that being like kind of what we talked about, like where big questions are wrestled with. Like I was just like, I'm glad I wrestled with the question. I don't know that I came out with any more certainty on it. And that's where even your friend, you said something like, theology's not that important or whatever.
Yeah.
Like I am like, it's important to wrestle with it because it helps us better define. It's the reason I think debate's important. Like
even if you don't come to a conclusion.
Yeah, right.
I dig that because it helps you be thoughtful about it.
Yeah. You got to be thoughtful.
You got to be thoughtful.
You got to be thoughtful. So
new merch. You got to be thoughtful.
I like that. Real sad that Skinks Not Skanks never really sold. That was one we thought was going to be good.
I don't think you made a merch of it.
Oh, I made a design. Maybe we didn't put it on the link tree or the whatever.
Remember when I just randomly brought up skinks on our podcast?
Yeah, that's what I was just referencing.
Yeah, it's just wild that I did that. Not surprising.
This is probably a good mid-show break to say, if you don't already follow us on YouTube, you should. It's a lot more...
I did subscribe on our YouTube.
Yeah, you did. I think that it's a lot more fun to watch on YouTube, but you have to be able to have like 30 to 45 minutes. But I'll sometimes put it on the background to like watch.
You can do other things.
Yeah. So definitely subscribe to our YouTube. It helps more people find it, but also like it's just fun for us to be able to interact with people that way. Also, we do have a Patreon. You can find that, all of that on our link tree, merch, all that kind of stuff. Like we, above all, are just trying to get more connected to our community. And those are some easy ways for that to happen. So
absolutely. And get our merch.
I still am going to buy the blue Deconstruction.
You're gonna get the same thing I did?
Well, I'm gonna get it in a t-shirt, I think. But
okay.
I liked that color and that design.
Yeah, I think it's dope.
Wear it on the next episode. So with that though, let's move into
our recommendations.
Yeah.
Can you go first this time?
I think so. I don't have a great one. It's just the final season of Ted Lasso is like it's been really good.
Oh, I'm kind of behind on
it. So I'm really bad about like if I watch a show,
you
like
are really
I'm
bad.
all about it. Well, I'm totally depraved. We were all on the same page there. I'll start a show and I'll like love it.
Mm-hmm.
But then it like takes a year for the next season to come out. And so I'm like, so I started Ted Lasso on season 2. So I binged 1 through 2. And then I like
got it
a year to wait. So I would say Ted Lasso season 3 has been really, really good. It's like one of the few shows. One I know that I'm going to stick up with, which is one of the best shows I've ever watched in the history of TV, is Severance.
Severance is
so good. So I cannot wait for season 2 of Severance. Apple TV, it's so good. So
do you know when it's coming out?
I think it's coming out in the next couple months.
I love Severance so much.
Yeah. For some reason I had May in my mind, but I might be wrong about that. But
dude, if that's right, I'm going to cry.
I'll Google it while you do your reservation.
Okay.
Or your recommendation.
My recommendation. So yeah, like I kind of previously mentioned, I've started Movie Mondays with my friends, which has been super fun. I make dinner and then I get to make the movie. It's what I've decided is how it's going to go. I think so. And so last Monday, we watched this movie, Women Talking. Which was
problematic.
It was a very problematic film. It was a Oscar nominee for Best Picture, and so I wanted to watch it. And it is so flipping good. I can't get over it. It's basically these women. Takes place in 2010, based on real events, and they are they're all getting like sexually assaulted by the men in the like religious community. Like they're like, I think they're like they're Mennonite. And then the men go to like sell something. I don't know. And the women, it's just these women in this barn figuring out if they're gonna stay and forgive the men, stay and like fight for their rights, or just leave. And it's just all these women talking about like all the merits of that for 2 hours.
Dang.
It's powerful and so good, and I just couldn't recommend it more, and I just loved it.
What's it called?
Women Talking.
Okay.
I dig it.
I do have bad news. Late 2023, early 24 is when Severance season 2 comes out. Production began in October, but we got some time.
That's a lot of time.
That's a lot of time. I'm blown away at how long it's taking.
And for my other recommendation, I'm kind of going back in my reserves recommendations. Ooh. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not doing all like what I just watched and read.
You're like, let's go down Goodreads and just see what we find.
Absolutely. My favorite. Oh, you know what? No, I'm going to change my answer. I just read Concrete Rose with my class by Angie Thomas, who wrote The Hate You Give. Mm-hmm. So it's actually like a prequel to The Hate You Give.
Okay.
And I just like, my student said this, and it's been sitting with me, and I just like want to share it. Is my student was like, I wish more white people would read this to like know what life in the hood is like. And I just think that that's so important, and I want to share that. And it's very. There's a point in it where we were reading it together, and I was like, guys, I kind of want Maverick to start selling drugs again because he needs the money. And they were like, right? They were like, now you get why we sell drugs. And I was like, so it was like kind of intense, but also like I think really powerful and important. And it's also written a lot like how like my students speak. And so one student, she was like, I've never read a book that sounds like me. And just these like really powerful moments. And I really liked it. And I would recommend that.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. I think like I enjoyed our conversations throughout this, but it took a unexpectedly deep dive at the beginning, and I think it's been fun.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I don't really have any like last words. Yeah, maybe just like ponder for you, like, what's the purpose of church? And do you believe in original sin? This is more of a question takeaway.
Yeah. I like the like pondering what, like, I think that's a good question to ponder. Yeah. It's like, what are you looking to get out of religious community?
Absolutely. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And with that being said, embrace the journey.